Ladies and gentlemen, I have much pleasure in welcoming all present, both here and online, who are participating in this town hall meeting. My sincere thanks to the media for promoting this event, for being present this evening. The commissioners who are present on the panel for this evening's session are Commissioner Carrie-Ann Eiffel, Commissioner Marianne Redmond, Adriel Braffett, and Commissioner Sulmin Balbulia. The other members of the commission present in the audience is Commissioner Kathy Walder, and the Secretary to the Commission, Professor Cynthia Barra-Giles, is also present. Commissioner Eiffel is the lead commissioner at this town hall event, and I now pass over to her the conduct of this evening's proceedings.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, fellow commissioners, good evening and welcome. It is indeed my pleasure to be here with you this evening as our commission, the commission which was constituted by the President of Barbados. We are here this evening to engage with you, the members of the public, for your input into the future country that we all want to see, the country that we all deserve. How have we been working? Having been appointed in June of this year by our President, the Commission has been working on several fronts. We've held several internal meetings as we organized ourselves and the methods in which we intend to proceed on your behalf to deliver the Constitution of Barbados. We have established several subcommittees which have been working extremely steadily and very hard. These subcommittees are stakeholder engagement under the chairmanship of Adriel Braffett, Commissioner, public engagement and education under the chairmanship of Shade Jemond, who is joining us online tonight. Research and engagement under the chairmanship of our Deputy Chair, Senator Gregory Nichols. But what have we really done? In addition to the several meetings of the subcommittees and the full commission, we've been hard at work behind the scenes while also engaging with the public in a variety of ways. We've had several radio programs, both on brass tacks as well as Let's Talk About It. We've also had the launch of the book, which was revised by Professor Velma Newton on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General, Barbados, Constitution, Facts, and Questions. Copies of which are available tonight for you to take away to study so that we all can become better educated on what our Constitution is, our history, and to answer some of the questions that we all have had over the years. Further today, we launch our new website, crcbarbados.com, which features this quote: "They have a mirror image of themselves. They have self-respect. They have a desire to move their country forward by their own devices. They are not waiting for anybody to come and give them handouts, and there is no unemployment. The words of His Excellency, Errol Walton Barber. Our website features many things, including our mission, and it also holds online copies of both Professor Newton's book and the Constitution of Barbados with all of its updates and comments. Shaping our future together through consultation with the citizens and organizations of Barbados, whether at home or abroad, the Constitutional Reform Commission has been appointed to oversee the development and enactment of a new constitution for Barbados. In addition to our website, we've also developed many media by which you can reach out to us apart from these town hall sessions. We have our email address, constitutionalreform@barbados.gov.bb, where you can send your submissions, your questions, your queries. Each one of them is perused, is read through, and deliberated upon. No submission is discarded. We have developed a hotline for those who do not wish to engage with the online experience. That number is 536-1250, 536-1250. For other persons, we have developed several social media platforms. You can find us at CRC Barbados on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Even further, the Constitutional Reform Commission has partnered with the U-Report platform to support its public education and engagement. This includes a series of mobile exercises that explore key aspects of the Constitution of Barbados as part of the ongoing national constitutional reform process. Simply send the word reform to the number 832-6775 via WhatsApp to participate also. You can sign up today to be included on our mailing list. Now this mailing list, don't be afraid, is not one that will inundate you with a whole set of information. We'll be sending out reminders of upcoming activities, of which there will be several activities, but those are the only things you'll get from us. There's a paper that should be going around the room as we speak to collect your contact information if you wish to join our mailing list. If you don't get hold of the paper but still want to be part of the mailing list, please see Commissioner Kafkawala, who is responsible for collecting that data. All of this is well and fine, but really, why are we here? Taken from the preamble of the book prepared by Professor Velma Newton, I quote, "The Barbados Constitution declares itself to be the supreme law of the land. That declaration is not in any way an indication that as a document it is immutable and fixed. Constitutions are living documents that must allow for the change over time to meet the changing needs of the society which it regulates." In other words, ladies and gentlemen, exercises like today's town hall, which is the second in a series of 3 town hall meetings to discuss general areas of concern, are here for you to come before us and the rest of Barbados to share your opinions. We invite all of you to speak with us today. Let us know how we can make the Barbados that we all need and deserve. These 3 town hall meetings, the first at St. Michael's Secondary School, this evening's exercise, and next week at the Dighton Griffith School, begins a series which will continue with the thematic town hall meetings. All that fancy word means is that our Constitution is broken into separate chapters, and at each of those meetings, We will discuss the specific chapter under consideration on that occasion. They will get started later in November, and I hope to see you and others present on that occasion. But that is enough of a preamble from me. We all know why we're here, what we're doing here, and how we intend to do it this evening is this. There are microphones available in the room. If anyone wishes to make a submission, please approach the mic, identify yourself. As I used to say in another place on another time, it's pointless raising your hand to catch the eye of the chair. It won't work. But simply identify who you are, and we will listen. Good evening, and we welcome our first submission.
Good afternoon this evening to the ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Julian Roberts. I am here on behalf of the President of the Bajan Free Party, Honorable Alex Mitchell L. Say the Constitution of Barbados must have no slavery on any level. Number 2, rule of law. Number 3, enforcement of the law. Number 4, no fraud, transparency on all government and public matters. Clear title of all land sale. 6, restore our true history and must be in all schools. Freedom of information of all government departments. For the people matters. Rights to travel. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, WhatsApp, and all social media platforms, 100% health care, no estate fraud by lawyers, attorneys, or any other agents of the Crown, helpers or workers and associates, rights to contract. Constitution should be written in quantum syntax grammar. Reasons for this: so we, the people of Barbados, will be writing in fact and not fiction. All contracts as well. Right to self-determination. No conflict of interest. No private agreement that violates the Constitution of the rule of law. Constitution for the people, of the people, by the people. That is it. Thank you.
David, is it? David, I am responsible in terms of my committee, the committee that I chair, responsible for outreach, which would include like to your party. And I am fairly sure that we wrote you. If we did not, I apologize. But we sincerely want to engage your party, and we want to invite you to submit to us your full vision in terms of the Constitution in writing. After we've received that, we will review it, and thank you. Well, if you want to give it to me now, that's fine, but if you can email it, that'd be even better. And then we can actually discuss further what your proposals are in terms of having a constitution that all Barbadians, and including all political parties, are happy about.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a hard copy here, and it's visual, but everybody can see that. He give you the hard copy.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Michelle Edwards. I am a Barbadian by birth, to Barbadian parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and probably a lot further back than that. I speak to you on the considerations being given to the changes to the Constitution of Barbados should the Bill of Rights chapter contain a definition of gender neutral and be amended to provide that the Constitution should be gender neutral. And number 2, should the provision against discrimination be amended to include discrimination on the ground of being male or female, age, race, place of origin, class, color, religion, language, sexual orientation, and disability and political opinions. If you don't mind, I'd like to read what I prepared.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. As a broad overview of what the government intends to include in the new Constitution, which itself will guide the Republic, the Charter speaks to the term sexual orientation. I am therefore concerned about the inclusion of the term sexual orientation and its possible offshoots in the Constitution of Barbados and the resulting laws and statutes, as well as the term's effects on our educational curriculum. The global elitists, with the support and sanction of the United Nations, are moving forward a revolution of gender across the world in which all citizens are required to comply with their demands or feel the full weight of sanctions and penalties of all sorts. In the throne speech, the Governor-General, Her Excellency, said on this matter of sexual orientation, the world has already spoken. First of all, what does sexual orientation mean? If this controversial term, sexual orientation, is adopted in the Constitution, what impact will this have on the content of our sexual education programs in our academic institutions, including at the elementary and primary level? Will this inclusion in the Constitution facilitate the inclusion of comprehensive sexuality education, which I will refer to as CSE, which teaches children that can change gender with or without parental consent, and other radical forms of sex and gender identity? I only have a short bit more. CSE is a highly controversial rights-based approach to sex education that encompasses a great deal more than just teaching children and youth about sexual intercourse and human reproduction. Developed in the West, primarily in the United States, CSE is now being implemented in most countries around the world. Comprehensive sexuality education programs seek to change sexual and gender norms, and thereby teaching youth to advocate for their sexual rights. Most CSE programs promote acceptance of diverse sexual identities and orientations, and have an almost obsessive focus on sexual pleasure, instructing children and youth at the earliest ages on how to obtain sexual pleasure in a variety of ways, including masturbation. While I am aware that the CSE program is not included at this moment under the name CSE, I am aware the elements of the program are already included in our sex education programs within our schools. What impact will this inclusion of the unscientific notion of sexual orientation, what will it have on our educational reform within our schools? Will the inclusion of its advance, will it advance the sexual imperialism of the UN and other international bodies and impose their agendas on the young, impressionable minds of our young children, even from elementary and primary levels within our education? I finish with this. And at what age will this indoctrination start? Countries, especially the US and Europe, have started this radical form of sex education from as early as 4 years old. I want to ask anyone here today if at 4 years old, did any of you have any idea or any thinking about sex? I am aware that the CDB and UEI have collaborated to produce a Caribbean regional curriculum on gender socialization in early childhood education. This is for 3 to 5-year-olds. Do parents have access to this curriculum? Words have power. Words are the filter through which we create and respond to our environment. Will our country find the intestinal fortitude to resist the intimidation of international bodies and stand for the sovereignty of our nation under God? Will an acceptance of this term in our Constitution be an affront to what our Father of Independence told the international world when he said that we would be friends of all and satellites of none? Is the new republic to be guided by an ideology and discard plain common sense? I ask you to consider that, Miss Commissioner and all your panel today. We sing an anthem, and as far as I know, no other anthems in the world have ever been changed. We are still singing the same anthems because this country was formed and founded on godly principles. We have many denominational religions living at peace and harmony in this country. We do not need other outside forces to come and tell us how to run our country or how to educate our children. I am a grandmother of one. She is present here with me today. I choose the right, and I choose for my daughter to have the right to teach her what she needs to know about sexual education. And every parent has that right. And we have the right to refuse anything that you bring to the educational system that we do not think or approve of to our children. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your submission, Ms. Edwards. Please give it to Commissioner Kakdawala or to our secretary. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, who would like to address us next?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening and welcome.
I'm Jabari Jones. I came to advocate for a constitutional right to sustainable transport. I prepared for 2 presentations, a short one which lasts about 5 minutes and a more extended one which lasts 50 minutes.
Mr. Jones, I'm sorry, I must interrupt you. I neglected to state that we are encouraging persons for 5 to 7 minutes for their first submission. You can always come back another time, but you can do 5 to 7 minutes. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
I also prepared a 1,600-word document which summarizes what I'm advocating. I have not sent it to the Constitutional Committee because it is still a work in progress, and I'm finalizing some of the details of my proposal. I will now go on to do my short presentation. Article 13 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, "Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state." There has been an increase in car centricity in the last half century, especially within the last 2.5 decades. We are supposed to be moving towards a more sustainable future. And when you think about a car-centric transport system, it is the least desirable, socially, environmentally, and health-wise. Socially, it excludes large segments of the population by eliminating, or in a very substantial way, reducing their mobility. It may also force large segments of the population to put their lives or the lives of others in danger to secure their mobility. It is especially bad for vulnerable groups, namely the youth, the poor, and the elderly, and it limits our choices. Not everyone wants to be dependent on cars to meet their transport needs and desire more options. The existing infrastructure for active transport needs much to be desired. It is inadequate. Public transportation can be irregular and unreliable in many rural areas, late at night, and on Sundays. Environmentally, it contributes to high CO2 and other emissions. It causes congestions, which increases travel time and fuel costs from slow-moving vehicles. There's also not adequate infrastructure for public transport, such as bus lanes. Therefore, buses are often stuck in traffic when they should be given priority access. Widening roads does not solve the problem. They simply induce further car usage and increase the cost of road maintenance. Car centricity also contributes to land use patterns which do not consider active or public transport access to sites or areas, further increasing reliance on cars. Health-wise, they encourage sedentary lifestyles. A sedentary lifestyle is a lifestyle where you are inactive. This has been associated with increased risk of non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and hypertension. I would like to now cite to you some recent data from the Ministry of Health. 1 in 5 people in Barbados has diabetes. 640 million a year is spent on treating diabetes and hypertension. 80% of the deaths in Barbados have been attributed to non-communicable diseases. 1 in 3 children are obese. Additionally, sedentary lifestyles are a risk factor for other illnesses, such as migraines, breast cancer, colon cancer, depression, high blood pressure, lipid disorder, hair loss, higher mortality, osteoporosis, scoliosis, lower back pain, and weight gain. Additionally, CO2 and other emissions, especially those caused by cars, may cause neurological, respiratory, or cardiovascular problems such as asthma in children, which will get worse during development. Steps have already been taken towards sustainable transport, but the constitutional right to sustainable transport will ensure moving forward the government does not retreat on existing obligations and continues on a sustainable path. Sustainable transport is a system that embraces multiple transport modes and prioritizes modes with lower emissions and are more inclusive. At the top of this system are active modes. These are the ones where you use your own energy to get around. This is divided into 2 tiers: walking, jogging, skating, and rollerblading at the upper level, and cycling at the lower level. Below active transport is public transport. Below public transport is shared transport. At the very bottom are private cars, parked cars. Some modes part of the lower tier called air travel. Sustainable transport would require more investment in infrastructure for walking, cycling, and public transport, and even shared transport. It would also require necessary support, which includes inter alia, reduced taxes and subsidies, access to finance, education, and appropriate institutional arrangements. This would have to be supported by the appropriate legislation. I would now like to draw your attention to this chart which summarizes sustainable transport. It's shaped in an inverted pyramid. The top two layers are active transport. This top layer is walking. This lower layer is cycling. Then below that, we have public transport. Then we have shared transport taxis. Then at the very bottom, we have private cars. This is my short presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for your submission. We look forward to receiving your paper when you have completed. I would like to, before I invite the others, I'd like to make apologies on behalf of Commissioners Senator Dr. Reverend John Rogers and Commissioner Christopher DeCaries, as well as Commissioner, oh no, we're waiting here. They are unable to be with us this evening, but they too will be following us online. I invite the next person to come forward and make your submission. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good night to the entire board of the Barbados Constitutional Commission. My name is Luke Lascaris, and I'm here to speak about what I think is important with regards to the Constitution of Barbados, the future Constitution of Barbados. I first want to say that I believe that the Charter of Barbados should be included as a preamble to the Constitution, and that it should be codified into law and become protected by law and be used as a guiding document for the Constitution of Barbados. I believe it's very important that human rights also be a focus of the Constitution, and that people's rights are included, and that the Constitution reflects protecting the rights of the vulnerable members of our society, such as the youth, the elderly, women, and minority groups such as LGBT people and disabled people. We need to create a more holistic Barbadian society for the 21st century that includes all Barbadians and doesn't just include able-bodied people. It doesn't just include people who look like us. Barbados is made up of many types of people, and our Constitution needs to reflect that, and it needs to include them as well. We need to remember that our Constitution should be a living document, and it's just not supposed to be frozen in time. It will not be just for Generation X or the millennials or Generation Z, but it must be framed to include Generation Alpha and must be written with the future in mind. I also want to emphasize that the Constitution in its language, again, must be inclusive as possible and include protection for all vulnerable groups. I would like to go on to say that this includes especially elderly people, because we have a problem with elder abuse in Barbadian society, and the Constitution should be written with that in mind and create protections for those people so that once you reach a certain stage in life, you aren't abandoned at the hospital, or that you aren't able to be just tossed away once it's seen that you've gone past your stage where you should be productive to society. I would also like to emphasize, and I hope that this language from our current Constitution is included in the new Republican Constitution, that Barbados is a secular nation and it needs to be treated as such, and the Constitution needs to reflect that. I remember there was somebody from the last meeting, I can't remember the man's name, but he was opining that meetings should not open with prayer, and I must agree with him on that. Barbados is an interfaith country. We have many types of people included in Barbados, and not only does our Constitution need to reflect that, but our culture also needs to reflect that. I would like to go on to say that this is a pivotal moment in Barbadian society, and we must be very focused at this time to ensure that the Constitution reflects a modern Barbados. I do not know if it is the remit of the Constitutional Commission, but I think it's also very important that the communication around constitutional reform and the future of the Republic of Barbados, and the way that the information goes out regarding constitutional reform and the new Republican Constitution, it needs to be beefed up. There are many people in my generation who are not aware of what constitutional reform means, who don't understand the process of it, who don't even understand that November 30th will not be Republic Day, that it remains Independence Day, and we will not have Republic Day until we have a new constitution. So there's lots of information that needs to go out. Again, I do not know if this is the remit of the Constitutional Commission, but it needs to be beefed up, whether through GIS or Public Affairs Department, that lots and lots of information needs to go out regarding the importance of constitutional reform. So again, I just want to close by saying that a constitution, our new Republican Constitution for the Republic of Barbados, needs to speak towards the future. It doesn't just need to speak towards the current time. It needs to speak towards issues that Generation Alpha may face, and issues that point us in the direction going forward, and it needs to be as progressive as possible, because it needs to be as inclusive as possible, whether this is regards to protections such as same-sex marriage, protections so that people are not discriminated against by the court, protections that they can't be discriminated against in places of work, but that is as inclusive as possible. I want to close with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, anybody? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lascaris. Just on your point of information and sharing of information, I sit on the Public Engagement and Education Subcommittee, and we will be putting up a number of articles relating to the Constitution, relating to matters relating to the whole aspect of constitutional reform on our website and our social media. We will be engaging the public in those matters, so you can look out for those information.
Thank you, Commissioner Babuya. Next submission.
Good evening. Someone
Good
thinks I'm
evening.
tall. Good evening, Verla de Pisa.
Good evening.
I know that you're getting a lot of submissions on the Bill of Rights, and I wish you well in distilling all of that information and the disparate rights that everyone is hoping to have enshrined in the Constitution. And it is not my intention this evening to make your life any more difficult where the Bill of Rights is concerned. My presentation is in relation to how our government functions, and in particular, our parliament, our president, and that will be my focus because, well, never have I ever been constrained to 5 to 7 minutes. So I really do need to speak only on a small portion of the Constitution. And I can always come back another day and speak on something else.
You can speak again this evening.
Why, thank you. I am concerned. We moved towards the Republic, and I think that we did it without having much thought as to what it entailed. And so we put a president in place and gave her a term that really and truly does not do justice to our democracy. Because the term of 4 years is way too close to our political term. And if there's one thing that we should do in our Constitution, is to insulate our head of state from political interference. This is not a new idea, but it is one that I want the Constitution to take on board and consider a term of 7 years instead. That does not collide immediately with a 5-year parliamentary term, and I will speak to that a little later too, but it allows a president to not only seem to be independent, but to actually be independent of mind. Because let's face it, I don't think it would ever be the intention of the Barbadian public to simply replace one figurehead with another. So I would like us to move to a point where we are also speaking to a president who has an executive function, and is not just a functionary. I don't think that we need it in a society this small, and I don't think that it is really much of a promotion of democracy to have a figurehead as our head of state. So I would want also for you to consider that there is an active role for a president a part of the executive function. Again, not an original thought, and I invite you to consider the French model of how they divide their executive duties between their president and their prime minister as one that you can consider even if you don't follow, and it is always open to modify to suit the local situation. But we do not need a figurehead. We need someone who is doing more, even though it is nice, than visiting our centenarians. That is a wonderful touch, and it must never disappear, but there must be some actual duties for our president. Alongside the president and a 7-year term, which then would allow for some difference and also some deference between the president and the parliament. I think that we have reached a stage where we need to be speaking firmly about how we manage our elections. And one of the ways that the Constitution can address that outside of legislation is to have fixed term elections. Again, not a new concept, but one which we really do need to take seriously so that we do not have, again, extraneous, I shouldn't use that word because it's a little derogatory, but we should not have the whim and fancy entering into something as serious as our political determinations. So if it were that we knew when elections were, then we would all know what we are working towards. And I think one of the fallouts from having a knee-jerk reaction, for most people it will be that only one person as it stays right now knows when the election day will be. For the rest of us, it is sprung upon us. And I think one of the fallouts from a system like that is exactly what we saw in January of this year, where we took note for the first time, but really it has been a phenomenon for the last 4 or 5 elections, and that is a declining presence of voters participating in the election. Because there was an arbitrariness to it, and we can't get away from that. And we need to be looking at all the different ways that we can empower our people. And yes, I'm getting to that as well, hopefully within this 5 to 7 minutes. So we've touched on the president, we've touched on the elections, which would be the House of Assembly. And so I want then to speak to the Senate, which, having been a member of it, I can say, and I have with me the esteemed president, today, and she was a wonderful leader of the Senate. But I am sure she will agree with me that there were certain things that we were hamstrung on. So calling the Senate a second eye, or that we offer some protection or some barrier to any arbitrary action from the lower house, really only operates where the senators are free of mind. And when you have the majority of the senators are chosen by the sitting government and 2 for the opposition, and then the next batch, but larger, chosen, we call them independents, but they're chosen by the president, as we have now. We cannot truly speak to having a different opinion in that second place. So if it were then, if we keep first past the post for the House of Assembly, but we move to proportional representation to make sure that we have a greater spread of knowledge in the upper house, in the Senate, then we could honestly say that we're working in a democracy, that we're allowing greater participation of our people, because that really should be what we are looking at right now. Not just switching the hat around to the back, but giving other people the opportunity to wear that hat, giving other people the opportunity to speak up other than fora like these, which are good and should not stop. But if we had that consistent participation of more of our people in a meaningful way, I think that we will also see the participation at the voting booth increasing as well. I want also, even though this was dealt with by legislation before, but I would love for it to be enshrined in the Constitution, and that is to have a devolution of our power towards the people. We had constituency councils. They were closed down unceremoniously, but quite frankly, if we had them in place during the lockdowns, then we would have known where those pockets of poverty were. We would have known where to target the baskets, and nobody would be turned up at my house with a basket of goods because there was no differentiation whatsoever. It should have been a needs-based assessment, and a constituency council would have had that information to hand. So if it were that it were enshrined in the Constitution that some form, it doesn't have to be that same form, I am okay with a new way of thinking. But if we can have more of our people participating in the democracy other than every 5 years marking an X, I do believe that we will have a better society and a better citizenship, and it might make your job a lot easier in settling a bill of rights, because then we would be a lot more open to understanding other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone? Any response? No? Thank you, colleague. Next. Welcome.
My name is Yarlene Nicholson, and I want to ask the question, now that we are a republic, how will families with dual citizenship be affected in the proposed constitution?
Could you repeat the question?
Now that we are a republic, how will families with dual citizenship be affected in the proposed constitution?
Okay. Chair?
As presently envisaged, dual citizenship is open and is provided for in the current constitution. There is a thought, however, which I have just put up there as a thought, that dual citizenship shall not necessarily be held by a small category of persons in Barbados. And I just take the opportunity of this town hall to throw it out for your consideration. And that is, shall people who have control of the security of Barbados have an allegiance elsewhere? Shall people who serve in Parliament and are cabinet ministers have an allegiance to another country? But for every citizen of Barbados who have citizenship from another country because they have lived abroad, they've become Americans, the Canadians, British, what have you, Caribbean people, and who have no aspirations whatsoever to any of these, what I call 100 positions, top 100 positions in the country, dual citizenship shall not be a problem, and the Constitution currently recognizes that. The question, however, is, shall there be any consideration to limiting citizenship of Barbados alone to those who are high office holders? And in some countries, they do that. I was looking today at the Constitution of Botswana, and the president of Botswana can only be a citizen of Botswana. The minister lost office in Australia recently because it turned out that he had citizenship in another country. We in Barbados have not actively looked at the issue. Our constitution from the inception has always recognized dual citizenship. But the question now arises as we go into a Republican state. Is this something that we will want to reconsider?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My second question, I just want to say child protection needs to be included in the Constitution. It's so, so important. It's all of our responsibilities to protect the children. So that's all I want to say.
Could you repeat your name, please?
Yarlene Nicholson.
Thank you.
say everything cannot necessarily be put in the Constitution. The Commission is committed to making recommendations for strengthening the other laws of the country where representations are made that satisfy us that the laws need beefing up. And that is true also, particularly in relation to children. We have to look carefully at how we reduce those rights into law and how we provide for them. But I just want to throw out the general caveat. Everything cannot be provided for in the Constitution. Where it cannot be, but we think the other laws need strengthening, we will make that recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Next submission.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Nike Jemet. Before proceeding to my point, I just want to make a response to what the gentleman has said earlier in terms of looking at minority rights. One of the functions of the Constitution is that it's to balance the rights of the individual against the rights of the majority. And it doesn't mean that you discount the rights of the minority in terms of being able to eat and having access to health care, but you have to balance that right of that individual against the rights of the majority. I thought that it would be helpful in terms of looking at this proposed new constitution to compare it to our existing constitution. And I mean, there are some obvious changes, namely the substitution of the title Governor General for the President. But there's one that isn't so obvious, and it's found under the Bill of Rights, under Section 26, subsection 1. And what I'm curious to know, I thought we were going to get a live answer here, but we'll see. But I do have a proposal at the end. And I'm curious to know why this subsection 1 of Section 26 has been changed from a general savings law clause, which would have immunized all laws prior to November 30th, 1966, and it has been changed to modification savings clause. I thought that was striking. I don't know if you have a response now, but my concern is, and I don't know, it's purely speculative. You can tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong, but I know one of the contentions with this particular clause, the general savings clause as it exists right now, is that it made it problematic if anyone wanted to challenge the laws which would have legalized buggery that has been reenacted under the Sexual Offences Act. And so this modification savings clause has been inserted because I don't know if it'd be helpful to read both of them. So the existing clause says, the existing law shall continue to be enforced, but shall be construed, sorry, that's the new one. Let me read the current one. Nothing contained in or done under the authority of any written law shall be held to be inconsistent with or in contravention of any provision of sections 12 to 23. Now, this is covering the fundamental rights of freedom in that section. That's what it's talking about. So currently, it immunizes any laws that were in existence prior to November 30th, 1966. And again, I said, some would say it would have made it problematic, and that's the reason why we haven't had a constitutional challenge to that section that has legalized buggery. And I think it should be interesting to note that under the Sexual Offences Act, that section that criminalizes buggery is sandwiched between sections that criminalizes also incest and bestiality. And I think that's significant because if times have shifted and in this what we call so-called modern society, that buggery is considered, what can be considered unnatural is acceptable, if bestiality, which is currently considered unnatural, and we reach a stage where that is considered acceptable, or incest, where are we going to be in the next 20, 30 years? I think that's just helpful to note. Now, the proposed amendment says, let me get it correct. Yes, the existing laws shall continue to be enforced, but shall be construed with such modifications, adaptations, qualifications, and exceptions as may be necessary to bring it into conformity with sections 12 to 23. My question is if you think that that proposed amendment makes that particular section that still criminalizes buggery more vulnerable to being deemed unconstitutional. And if you think so, my proposal, based on some of the other recommendations that have been made here tonight, that we leave section 26, subsection 1, as it currently is, and make no amendments to that. And I will conclude by saying one of the functions of the Constitution is to balance the rights of individuals against the majority. We cannot accommodate everyone's rights, but what is the majority view, and to take that into consideration.
Thank you for your contribution. You want to answer? You answer? Adriel. Colleagues, anyone wants to respond? No? Adriel?
Sorry. Thanks for your presentation. We got your name and contact details. That's correct, right? Because I don't want to answer you tonight and be wrong, but I believe that part of the challenge that we have in terms of Section 26 it's been the interpretation of the courts, of the modern courts, to certain sections of not only the Constitution, but certain pieces of legislation, like one or two that you mentioned. And Antigua is a good example that I think recently addressed the issue of buggery, for example. So I was slow to react to your presentation because I hope that you weren't suggesting that the change to Section 26 was indicative of the thinking of the government, which I cannot have an opinion on. I don't know what they were thinking when they made the amendment. But I do believe that lots of the modern thinking has been influenced by the court. I will publicly undertake to give you a detailed response sometime this week, meaning during the course of the week. Once I have your contact details, and in particular your email address, I will give you a comprehensive response. But thanks for raising it. But I do not believe that it is an indication of the thinking of the government and or the commission, because the commission has not crystallized its thinking on anything as far as I'm concerned, which allows me to make this comment, which is that my friend here raised the issue of children's rights, and the chair responded by saying that we can't include everything in the Constitution, and he is right. However, there are certain fundamental things that I would expect a modern Barbados Constitution should have, and in particular with respect to children, because I think children should have a right to education, a right to housing, a right to health care, a right to a meal every day. There are certain things that we should not be afraid to say publicly that we will place in the Constitution with respect to our children. Because, let me give a good example. Tony, I hope you're not trying to silence me. I had a child who was subject to the laws of the United States. And he used to say to me, Daddy, don't forget, you can't flog me. And I would say to him, when you bring your tail to Barbados, we'll have a discussion about that. You know what I mean? In terms of the different laws, the different jurisdictions, etc. But there are certain fundamentals that we should guarantee our children. They shouldn't be left to subsidiary legislation. They shouldn't be left to other pieces of legislation. We should have it in our constitution.
Thank you, Commissioner Brathwaite. Yes, Chair?
I shared with you will be put in a fashion that at the next town hall, we will update it and share it with all those who may have come to that session. So it's not limited to a one-on-one, so that we share whatever this, learning we have, because some of the issues we raised there call for some research. There's a case that's buzzing in my head, decided by the CCJ, but I don't have it with me, so I don't want to speak to it. That seems to have not looked at the whole saving clause matter. But I'll also say this in a general way, that in some respects, the lawyers in Barbados have been lazy. If there have been concerns about the constitutionality of the buggery law, they shall do what lawyers in other jurisdictions have done and take the challenge to the courts and let the courts look at it. So if the courts have a view, they will deal with it. But just don't, it's not everything that need necessarily be wait on for government or for Parliament. Just deal with it, if there's that view. Because at the end of the day, whatever we do is going to be subject to oversight by the courts. Bear that in mind.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brathwaite?
Tony, I don't want to appear to be having a disagreement with the chair again. But as a practicing lawyer in Barbados, I take exception to the comment that the lawyers have been lazy. Now, that particular section of the Sexual Offences Act actually said that requires someone to make a complaint, so that if two consenting adults decide that they want to have a relationship, two males or two females or what, have a relationship, then that was not the concern of the law because someone needed to complain. But the section protected children because children cannot consent. So to suggest that the lawyers should have brought an action negates the fact that consenting adults in Barbados were allowed for generations to have whatever type of relationship they require. It's only within recent times when certain sections of our population decided that they want to go to Canada, etc., and created the impression that Barbados was intolerant and that they'd be stoned and hanged and or shot. But consulting males in Barbados, and I'm speaking about males in particular, who had same-sex relationships, were all about the country for years, for generations, without any problem. And so to suggest that we were intolerant is unkind to us and untrue.
Thank you, Commissioner Brathwaite. Next submission.
Commissioner Brathwaite, I applaud you for that. You've brought up the great America, United States of America. Take a look at their society. You know, it says that when America has a cold, we catch the flu here, or the other way around. They have the flu and we catch a cold. Look at what they have done. They have opened up everything. The horses are out of the gate. There is no stopping anyone. The gray area is so wide. You mentioned that your son said, but Daddy, you can't flog me in America. But you said to him when you get home, though, I can see what I can do to you, because it says, spare not the rod. Spare not the rod. And what am I quoting? I am quoting the words found. Mr. Bulbuya probably has it in his Quran as well. It's in our Bible. It's the foundation of what the bedrock of what we Barbadians are. You mentioned other relationships and same-sex relations. Consenting adults. No problem. Whatever you decide, we don't differentiate, discriminate on faith, religions, anything. I was able to go to whatever school my parents sent me to. I was able to choose a career in which I wanted to go to and work hard and get it. Get an education, a free education, by the way. Thank you, all our generations before us. I just want to say, this country is as free as ever. If you want to let the horses out, if you want to throw out the water with the baby with the water, right? And you want to put all of this down in legislation, I think it's a very, very, very serious thing that we're doing. And I'm not talking about for now, I'm talking about the future. There will be no turning back. Laws are made to be kept. There has to be rules. When children are small, we tell them, no, you cannot do that. There are repercussions if you do that. What we're saying to everybody now is just go and do whatever you feel like. If it feels good, do it. Right? And the children are going to tell you that too. Just know the children are going to tell you that. You are telling me that you're going to put these rights into the children's hands. They're going to make the decision that I am a girl, and I'm not a girl, but I'm a boy. Today I'm a girl, but tomorrow I'm going to be a boy. But what are we doing? What are we doing here? Stick to what has worked in the past. It will not put us wrong. It will not. Mr. Lasaris talked about inclusion. I just have nothing to say. Inclusion. The spirit of inclusion. We human beings think that we can rewrite all things and change all things, and we are so wise in our own eyes. But we are going to run it amok. We are going to run amok, let me tell you, the wisest, most academic persons in this country. We are going to run amok if we try to pull down and change the laws as we have them now. Yes, you can make your adjustments. Yes, you can bring new things, but just stick to what has worked in the past. Right will always be right, and wrong will always be wrong. And that gray area is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And Lord help us all. We will not be able to bring the horses back into the stable, okay? We will not be able to get them all back into the stable after you have opened up all the gates. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next presenter.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Look, I'm not going to really present anything. I like what the lady over there said it all, yeah. We can't get rid of moral standards for politics in no shape or form. I, like you, had a son who was in England too. And when I told him I was going to smack him, yeah, he says, Dad, you can't smack me because I've phoned the child board. You know what I said to him? I said, that's no problem, son. Yeah, all that will happen is they'll say that I'm an unfit parent and they'll give it to somebody else. And I still kept smacking them. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So the Constitution, where morals stand, it can't move. It cannot move, it has to stay. And like the lady said over here, it's got to go for the majority. And like the lady said over there again, no one, like you said, no one discriminates against gay people in Barbados. Yeah, my dad's 83, and he told me they were along here coexisting, And no one, because no one discriminates against them, do we? Yeah, so they can live in harmony, but like the lady says, it's got to be for the majority rule. And Verla, I did hear you mention about the elections and how they went. The reason why the vote is down is they didn't spend enough money to buy the votes, because you know that's how it goes, yeah? So everyone's sitting down at home, and you know what they're saying when they're sitting down at home? But I ain't going nowhere till somebody hand over some money. That's why they ain't had a lot of people to vote. That's all I wanted to say.
Colleague, you didn't give your name. Could you give us your name, please?
Roy Turney, I represented the Beijing Free Party. It's Roy Turney. I represented the Beijing Free Party for the first time. I have had a look at other parties. I just wanted to get into. You're not allowed to promote any party. No, I'm not. I just wanted to get into it just to make a change. Yeah, I funded my campaign out of my own pocket. Yeah, I could keep my money in my pocket. Yeah, and go on the Tui Marella if I like. But at the end of the day, I do want the people of Barbados to have
St. Michael Northeast.
Yeah, that was me, yeah.
Roy, this picture of you have you looking older? You're a young man.
I ain't really, you know. When you live good and you have morals like the lady was talking about, you look younger, yeah? Your deeds normally tell on your face, you know what I'm saying to you? Yeah? So watch yourself. Yeah. I'm just saying, why can't we just have a fair society? I mean, look. If we had the same rules that we had, that our parents gave us, we didn't have sex education in school, yeah? We automatically just grew, yeah? And then we either felt that we were a man or we felt that we were a woman, yeah? If there was 1,000 of us that was there, probably one might think, well, and there was no discrimination. We accepted it and let everyone live. So as I keep saying, I was on the march, as you know, and these things shouldn't even get into the school. They shouldn't even get into the school, because bottom line is, we have governance here. How does this type of thing pass government to be in our school? How does that happen? But I do know how it happens. It happens, yeah, because we voted. So the people who are in power have the mandate to bring these things in. So you know what you need to do. Yeah? Can I have a bit more? Can I have a bit more? I'm going to have a bit more. They said I can have a bit more. You know what you need to do. Yeah? What I would say is this. Can I name political parties?
No.
No. No, because what I'm saying is we've had a two-party system. I had a gran here. She lived to 100. She got a card from the Queen, and the Governor-General came to our house. And when I used to take her to the hospital, the D's was in power, and I waited 3 days in accident and emergency. And then the B's was in power, and I waited 3 days in an accident and emergency. Then the D's was in power, and I waited 3 days in an accident and emergency. Can't you see that you've got to vote anybody except them two if you want to have 1 day turnaround in the hospital? You understand what I'm saying to you?
Thank you, Mr. Tony.
Okay, look. I could talk all night about it.
I'm sure. You could always come again later. Thank you. Next person, please.
I'm glad you're coming, because I have a question. Based on the submission of Mr. Pisa, she reminded me that in between cricket this morning that I saw that was voting in Brazil, and that Brazilians in the United States were lining up to vote, and that Brazil requires all Brazilians, I do not remember the age, but I'm sure my secretary would tell me if she so desires, were mandated to vote. Right. So I'd be interested to hear your comment on that, and maybe my friend's comment, who hopefully will not endorse the comments of his colleague in terms of which party is more suitable, because that's not what this discussion is about. But certainly, when I saw that this morning, I thought it is something that, if not raised this afternoon, that I would encourage us to hear your views about.
On the voting, mandating of voting, well, really and truly, by law, when you vote, you'll be actually giving away all your rights. This is law. You actually, it was called to demolish, right, to give away all your rights. And I actually came up to this mic to talk about law, because law is not practiced in this country, period. But it's not practiced from the beginnings and the foundations of the Constitution as well.
Sorry, David, I don't want to cross you.
Yeah.
What do you mean by when you vote, you give away your rights? Because I saw that you ran in St. Michael West Central.
No. I ran. One of the reasons I ran was to get information out there to the people, because a lot of people don't know law, period. Right? And one of the reasons I ran, not only for the BFP, Bajan Free Party, but because I care about the people and getting information to the people out there when it comes to the Corona period. Right? Let me say my name again, David Julian Roberts. I also am a student of the federal postal court judge Mark Kishon Christopher. We call it patriarchal judge for the entire planet, right? With the Corona period that we had, the word Corona stands for the center of the sun, which is golden seal, which stands for the golden era, which representing a new age coming into the earth, what you call the Aquarius age. Oh, this is the law. And we have moved from debitors to creditors, because we was by the banking system, by the straw man. If anybody know about the straw man, when you were born, your name was put in capital letters on your birth certificate, putting you as a corporation, where corporations came off of corpus electus, which is, a dead entity, but you are a living being, not dead. So when it comes to legalese is go over a lot of people's heads in Barbados, which is the color of law, right? And one of the things that I used to watch a lot of movies years ago, and I used to hear this terminology. Plymouth Rock, we didn't land it on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. Now, the reason for that statement is that maritime law came on to land. And the one that brought maritime law onto land was Benjamin Banneker, who brought maritime law onto land. And we, as the Moorish people or the Moorish nation, which you will know by contracts before, we had the contract, the discovery, right? Contract discovery, the Estevisa 1666. Then we had the Treaty of Tripoli of 1796, which allowed the corporation of Europe to practice trade in El Morocco or Morocco. It's called El Mixum. So a lot of people don't have knowledge of self today, not even law. So what we need to do as a people is understand our true history of this country. We don't even know. We don't even have the correct name for Barbados. The word for Barbados is Ishigruni Naim, by the indigenous people that were living here who will be off of the Amaru Inca. And true history books, they keep saying, we came by slave ships. We didn't came by slave ships because you can't find one. So the land belonged to us, and that was hidden from us for so long of period of time that the land was hidden from us. Even I look up here at the Alexandra school, what's called emblem, or what the case may be, and they can see a lot of Masonic stuff in the emblem itself. But these very foundations that build our nation took away our past at the same time. Yeah? So in forward, as we moving forward into the future, we want to be doing everything on a gravitational playing field across the board, which is leveling up everything. We leveling up the money, which all dollars can be equal to one another, from Europe to American dollar to the pound to everything is going to be balanced. And this ain't coming from me, This coming straight from the federal postal court judge, right? It can balance all across the board, which is the pound, the euro, even Barbados dollar can be up there. Barbados can be equal to every single dollar across the whole entire world. And I know that the people of this nation here should know everything that's about to go down and is about to go on to happen in this country itself, right? So law is something that should be taught. The real law, not the color of law, and losing legalese to speak over people's head. That people don't understand what is going on in this situation. Look at a word like human that was mentioned up here today on this panel. The word human means monster. Right? So when we're doing contracts, you can put the word human in the contract. that they belittle the person itself and take away its sovereignty, right? So a lot of sovereignty getting taken away every single day in this country, and people just sitting down. And by consenting to these things, you're accepting it. So when you consent to everything that has happened in the corona period itself, you are actually consenting. Mandate is only mandates given about 5 years or so, then it becomes law, right? We don't know the law. Bajan people just don't know the law. And I hope that once everything flipped, that it will be a level playing field across the board, that everybody will know what's happening in this country itself and what is going on and how we will connect to the outside world and so on, right? So I hope today that as we leave here, we leave with some more information and we could do research. I always say if anybody want to ask me any questions, they could come and ask me. Check me on my Facebook page, David Roberts. Ask me anything, any questions you want to know at all about anything. I spent 2 years home in the corona period with the federal postal court judge, the Queen of Canada, and the 7th Chief from the States decoding all information on this planet, all. You understand? So I would like that if anybody has any questions, they come and ask me, and I would, help you out to see the truth in what you wanted to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Submission. Thank you. Next submission.
Please.
Come.
Once you didn't take advice from the person behind you.
My senior. Where to start? I was trying very hard not to have anything to say about the Bill of Rights because I know that that is the hot button topic and everybody else will be talking about it, and the Constitution is so much more than that. But since the challenge was thrown out, I will say, by way of analogy of my child as well, my daughter bounced home when she was in primary school to let me know all about child rights. And I asked her, did they tell you what the responsibilities are? And there was deafening silence. Because we have never spent any time explaining to our people what their responsibilities as citizens are. And wherever there are rights, there are responsibilities. They balance each other out. So perhaps not just about voting, but a careful consideration of what it means to be a citizen, your duty to the state, in the same way that you have expectations of the state in the form of the Bill of Rights. So it would not hurt to have both the rights and the responsibilities of a citizen enshrined in the Constitution. But while I'm on my feet, I do want to respond to the young lady to my left. I don't remember the name, because my understanding of legislation is not a balancing of the individual and the majority, but a balancing of the individual and public policy. The public policy may actually be against the majority, like paying taxes. But the public policy says that there needs to be money from somewhere to run the country. So even though you own your property, there's land tax levied. All right? So it is not about balancing the individual and the majority, but balancing the individual and public policy. Further, even though this is not for your consideration, my understanding of legislation is that its intent is to protect the minority. The majority will take care of themselves by sheer numbers, but we have to look after those that are less able to look after themselves, which is where the legislation comes into play. I don't think I need to give real-life examples of that. You can just think about somebody stealing from you. There's a legislation in place to guard against that, all right? Which would be the mob against you, all right? And you being the one. So I view the Constitution, the prime legislation, and all the legislation under it different from my young colleague, but that does not mean that either of us is wrong. You get to decide what the Constitution will look like and who it is intended to protect. But as far as I understand, it is a public policy, individual rights balance, and not a majority consideration. But yes, by all means, consider the responsibilities of a citizen and put them in the Constitution. I have no difficulty with that at all. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bulbulia?
Just to point out, Mrs. DePisa, that we will be in January, the thematic town halls in January will be on the fundamental rights, chapter 3 of the Constitution, so you can come prepared for that one. Yes.
That's an open invitation. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take submissions for another 15 to 20 minutes. Who's next? No one? Here we are.
Hi, good night, panel.
Good night.
To the commission and to everyone.
Your name, please?
Harry Husbands, attorney at law. My take in relation to the new constitution as it should be framed, I think that, and I want to reinforce a point that I made on brass tacks over the last couple of weeks, I think that every election that the Barbadian public is placed in a dilemma between voting for the best member of parliament or voting for who they want to be as the government. I think that we have also found ourselves with an accountability issue as a nation where we expect the government to hold itself accountable. However, we found many deficiencies in that over the last few years in particular. I remember my very first constitutional law class with Mr. Gollop, where he said that we have an elected dictatorship. My suggestion would be that we create the post of an executive president and remove the current ceremonial president. I think it serves no purpose and it's just a symbol of a relic from the past. I think we have to go past the fact that we are no longer a British colony and we have to actually look at shaping our constitution to the way for the Barbadian reality and towards a modern society and an accountable society. I think the Senate as currently composed should be a house that the executive president gets to choose, and provided that we may create some facilities for some other disenfranchised groups, such as the disabled community and any other disenfranchised groups as they may arise from time to time. Possibly pulling a figure from the head, possibly a number of about 15 persons or so, from which the Prime Minister or the Executive President would be required to select a cabinet, and that way we would be able to have a cabinet that's a separate body from our lower house as currently composed. I think that it would allow us to have the lower house potentially being even of a different political character than the current cabinet. And I think that that would allow us to have a level of accountability. And we see all the issues with the Auditor General's reports, et cetera, coming up from time to time. I think that we can allow members of parliament to represent our constituencies and let them be the constituency representatives that we primarily elect them to be. Too often I've found in my experience that ministers have been viewed by their constituents as not being present. And I think that's because they're also placed in a dilemma between having to serve a national agenda or whether or not to serve their constitutional agenda. It also creeps into issues where jobs have to be given out by ministries. Certain ministers would only be willing to give other ministers or other persons from other constituencies certain jobs where their ministers are in charge of a ministry or where their colleagues are in charge of another ministry that would allow them also to get jobs. So I think to get past some of the slight corrupt or what may be viewed as corrupt practices in society, we need to hold ourselves accountable. And I think by overhauling the current composition of Parliament and the whole structure of Parliament, that would be one of the best steps, and I think one of the most needed steps at this time. I think it would allow us as a new and a young Barbadian group to not only feel a part of where we want to see Barbados go, but I think it reflects more of our society. It reflects better of our society. And there'll be more opportunities, I think, for persons who are lay people, as well as for the persons who are extremely academic and who may be very good practitioners who may not be political or may not view themselves as political, to be able to be easily or more easily handpicked by the executive president and operate in the ministry. So with that said, I just think that with the overhauling of the Constitution and with the overhauling of how we currently structure our governance, how we have our governance structure, I think that we'd be better able to represent Barbados and to get rid of one of the real big issues that we see creeping out in society, which would be corruption. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a real quick one, Mr. Braithwaite. You said that I wanted to uplift my party. It was never about party to me. I just met the guy. He told me about the party. The election came up the next couple of months, and I signed and was a member of the Bajan Free Party. That's how I got there. Probably if another party came, like the Barbados Sovereignty Party, I would have signed there.
But you should uplift your party. Is that wrong with that?
Pardon?
My comment, you should uplift your party.
I should.
Uplift your party?
Yes, of course, but I'm just saying, the thing is, for me, it's not about party, yeah? It's about a better standard of living for the people in Barbados. When I was at St. Matthew's Church, it was St. Matthew's School, was it? Mayor was there as well, and CBC came and they put the microphone in my face, and they said to me, how do you feel about running against the Prime Minister? I told them I ain't running against no one, that I'm running for the people of Barbados. And what I did say, and they quoted me really terrible in the newspaper, and they only gave me one clip on the TV on CBC. If any of you saw that clip of me on CBC, you would see that I look like the winner, but they haven't even got a copy of it. No, they haven't even put a copy of it on YouTube. You've got every other candidate having their speech, but you haven't got one of me, because I look like the winner, because I want begging votes. Yeah, I'm not here to beg votes, and I'm not here to big up any party. I'm just here for the people of Barbados to have a better standard of living. That's it. I don't care whether the Bs take on whatever I put down in my manifesto and implement it, because I still get my way. I don't mind whether the Ds do it. I still get my way, because I'm not in it for me. You understand what I'm saying to you? I'm not in it for me. It was my own money I spent. I'm in it for the people of Barbados. So that's what makes me different about, you know, the rest of you who want, you know, sort of a political future, and you want to be on that high level. I don't need to be on that high level. I've sat down and I watch you on CBC with all of the English rhetoric. Oh, well, the pedagogical system of Barbados. When I heard the word pedagogical, I had to look it up. And when I looked up the word, you know what it meant? Educational. So you're not speaking to the normal people of Barbados. That's for sure, not with that type of education. But because you think that it makes you look like you're intelligent and you know things, yeah, the university student might go along with it, but people who have got their minds open, they're not going to swallow that. Let me tell you something about the children who are in England. When the teacher tells us that house begins with H, yeah, and home begin with H, and the teacher tells the Caribbean black children who were born, whose parents were born here, you know what we say? When they say, how do you spell who? We say H-U. And only you know that who can't begin with a W, but because the people in charge tell you that that's how it has to be, you follow the narrative. I don't follow the narrative. You understand what I'm saying? So once we start following the narrative and do the things that are morally right, like that lady said in that first opening speech that she had, I think Barbados will be a better place. We got to stop trying to be or mimic somebody that we're not. And that's what's happening here. Education is 2 words, edit and dictation. So a man reads a master copy, edits it to suit himself, and dictates it to the child. The child don't get the A because the child's intelligent. The child got the A because it can recall from its memory what was dictated in that 12 months. Do you understand what I'm saying? Intelligence is to be able to think for yourself. And a lot of our children, especially based with that education that you give us, to confuse our children, because I know you're confusing our children, because this is what you tell our children: hair, H-A-I-R, hair, H-E-R-E, hair, H-E. You understand what I'm saying? That's what you're doing with our children. So you're confusing them so that you can bring the narrative that you want to put forward for the public, but it's not going to work because some of the people's minds are open.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney.
Thanks for your ears, sir. Thank you, everyone, for your ears. Anybody else?
Good
Welcome.
evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to the Constitution Committee. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joan Leacock, and I'm a resident of St. Peter. I came tonight, and I've learned a lot from everybody's contribution, and I have not delved into the Constitution like a lot of people. They researched it and gone through the priors and the befores and the afters and the nows. My simple contribution is tonight that the gentleman before me, who was a lawyer, Mr. Husband, if I'm correct, he said corruption is something we have to be aware of. And corruption in all fields of where we live in Barbados. Now, what's interesting is I've been here for 22 years, so I have dual nationality. Corruption is something I've seen and experienced firsthand. And for me, corruption starts with, if you're looking at proper governance of a country, if you're looking at the performance of standards of accountability, you have to look at lawyers. Quite frankly, and I'm sorry, Mr. Braithwaite, quite frankly, I've been here for 22 years. I studied law in England, and I decided it didn't suit my personality. So I came out of it, and I went into tourism. Happily to say, but that's another area altogether. I have, in those 22 years, been privy to a couple of cases, and I know that we are now actually drawing people's attention to the lawyers who are not doing their proper governance of working for their clients in a proper way, in a proper manner. In the last 4 or 5 years, you're actually bringing those people to trial and imprison them in some instances. I can recall 2 cases of an old woman, and I know this is the past, where a lot of old people have probably died, they don't have children, they don't have a husband, and the lawyer has kept their deeds and sold the deeds on as his own after a particular moment of time and gained it for himself, herself, and for her children. Most recent case for me is a friend. I live in Barbados. A lot of my friends who are British or Jamaican, but they're British born, they like where I live, they came here, they bought houses. One in particular, a friend of mine, Jamaican born but lived in the UK, he came to Barbados, I showed him a house, he loved it. He sent the money over to the lawyer. This is a recent case, this is in 2 years ago. The lawyer kept his money. He had to go through limping through the ethics committee, through the law society, through whatever area, to the fraud squad, and it was limping along. In this time, the property that he thought he'd bought, obviously they were saying it hasn't been bought. He had to scramble and find the money somehow to pay towards the mortgage for a year because the lawyer wouldn't let up and give him his money back, because the lawyer couldn't. Because what lawyers do, they don't keep a separate disbursements account. They use the money for their own benefits and pay off people as they go along. So they pay Peter to pay Paul, etc. So this guy was left. His reputation was tarnished by the bank, etc. He was not able. He still has the property because he's actually had to beg, steal, and borrow. His money has not been returned to him. It's still in law society, so I'm trying to sort things out, still with the fraud squad. Nothing has been done, it's limping along, and he's still fighting his cause. So those are 2 cases that I'm aware of, and one close to my heart. Now, the efficiency in government for the country is paramount for security of citizens to believe in their country. If you have, hands up, I support BLP. I love what they're doing, but some things even I get jarred at. But if you have, as an individual, no faith in the government, no faith in the police, no faith in the law, you've got anarchy. You have got anarchy. So this crime rate that we're experiencing now is just a shadow of what it could actually morph into. So probably with regard to the recent finding of that barrel of guns with no address on it, that was left there for you to find, because somewhere else the guns are coming in. So whether or not this will go into the Constitution, I don't know. I'm just an ordinary, everyday citizen who has my feelings. I have just crossed a bridge that I've never would hope anybody would cross. My mother was killed in her home 3 months ago. And I'm experiencing that now. So crime to me is paramount because she was 86 years old. Nobody should go through that. So from that perspective, crime is paramount to me. People have said to me, are you leaving Barbados? I said, no, I'll stay here. There's no need for me to go back to England because England has nothing for me. But my concern is that you have to do something with regard to the crime rate that's picking up in this country. People are frightened to go out. The elderly are scared. And if you don't believe that, you just speak to a lot of people living in general areas. So I worked for an airline in the UK, 2 airlines. So I understand how you find guns, how you find drugs, and how they plant things for you to find because they want to take your mind off or your eye off the real substance that's coming through. And quite frankly, you're dealing with the lower levels. The problem is up here. Somebody is giving the power and the authority to get them through. And plus the fact, because we don't have money, and as our Prime Minister has quite easily said that, you know, sometimes when you do a job like the nurses, we've got a brain drain of nurses leaving this country and going elsewhere.
You have 1 more minute, colleague.
Sorry?
1 more minute.
1 minute, okay. So you've got people leaving this country, and money is not a primary factor in them leaving. Perhaps it's treatment, I don't know. But people have a price. Policemen are still going to the Bahamas and still go to Caymans. You now want to recruit 250 more. But you're going to have to find some way of actually enticing them to stay and give them the rights and the means in which to do their work properly. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hi, good night, everybody.
Good night.
My name is Shamar Bavel. I'm an attorney at law. My point is very practical, and it speaks right back to the earlier conversation about the Bill of Rights and the direction in which we all know the country probably will go. And I'm a friend of none and a representative of no side whatsoever. I'm just a practical person that files come across my desk. And when you give an opinion on a matter, sometimes you got to think about other persons. And I just want to give 2 practical examples of why the Bill of Rights probably need to be updated. If you have we all know that there are certain alternative relationships in Barbados. You have 2 persons living in an alternative lifestyle. One person dies. The person that dies, they were the holder of the title to the property. What happens to the other person? Consider that. You have 2 persons that may have been in an alternative relationship. The relationship breaks down maybe after 20 years, and they would have probably made more what we call homemaker contributions towards the relationship. Now, for the normal type of relationship, we can go to the courts when we divorce and we could get something to put us back in the position that we probably should be in. But for the alternative relationship, what is their recourse? So when we speak to whether we should amend our Bill of Rights, we have to consider other people. It's not about our moral code or what we feel Barbados should be like or what Barbados was like when we grew up. It's about people and their practical day-to-day living and existence. And that is why we have to update and go forward. And this is the point that I make reservedly, but I will make the point. the same philosophical points that being made, that is how it was. And we can live like that. Those points were made in the 1830s for a different problem that we had at that time. And that is just the extent of my submission.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you for making your contributions here this evening. They have been heard, they have been recorded, and they will be reflected upon. As we prepare to end the second in our 3 town hall series, I wish to take this opportunity to remind you of a few things. First of all, please take a copy of this book, Barbados Constitution, Facts and Questions Revised. There are copies available here this evening. You can also download them at our website. I'll give you the website address in a minute. You may reach out to us at constitutionalreform@barbados.gov.bb with your written submissions. If you wish to leave us a voice message, do so by calling us at 536-1250. Join the You Report exercise via WhatsApp. It's one of our educational engagements. 832-6775. WhatsApp, reform to that number to join the You Report exercise. Join our social media platforms. Look us up at CRC Barbados on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Our website is full of information and will only get better over time. We have our beautiful logo launched there. You can visit that website, crcbarbados.com, where you can download a copy of the book, as well as a copy of the most recent iteration of the Constitution of Barbados. I take again this opportunity to remind you of the names of our commissioners and our secretary. Our commission is chaired by retired Justice Christopher Blackman. Our deputy chair, Senator Gregory Nichols. The other commissioners, Senator Dr. Reverend John Rogers, Commissioner Shade Jemet, Commissioner Solomon Bulbulia, Commissioner Khalil Koftawala, Commissioner Adriel Brathwaite, Commissioner Krista Carries, Commissioner Marianne Redmond, and I am Commissioner Carrie-Ann Eiffel. Good evening, everyone. Travel safely to your various destinations. See you next week. Bring your friends when we commence our 3rd in this series at the Dighton Griffith School, 5 to 7 next Sunday, November the 6th. Good evening and good night.